Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished House of the Dragon Episode 8, The Lord of the Tides. And to say that the show has played veritable jump rope with quality is a bit of an understatement. A lot of the show has been varying from meh to good and decent, with only one episode that I would call specifically bad. And this episode is a return to the madness of the series. There was two good scenes that I really enjoyed, and then the rest of it was setup. Now, setup is good and important for a lot of stories, but there's a point when it becomes too much setup, and this series really kind of has this issue. For a season that's supposed to cover the Targaryen Civil War, there's been no Targaryen Civil War 8 episodes into a 10-episode series. That's a little bit too much setup, in my opinion, for a season that's focused on the Targaryen Civil War. Now, if this whole season was just to the precipice of it, and then season 2 was the actual Civil War, that would be understandable. But from what my knowledge of this show and their plans for it are, it's apparently going to be an anthology, so the Targaryen Civil War will be wrapped up in 2 weeks. That just seems a tad anticlimactic with all this setup and then only 2 episodes of payoff for something this large. I think it should have been about half setup, half not. Trim quite a bit from the series. I think it would very much improve. And there's been a lot of great setup with a lot of good dialogue, but I think you could cut quite a bit of it and still get all that we've achieved in these 8 episodes into 5 episodes without losing too much. But those 2 scenes that were good in this episode were very, very good, at least by modern day standards. So I'm very happy that we got those. A lot of the rest of it was just not very engaging and a bit annoying, to say the least. But before I get any further, there will be spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. This episode centers around the succession of the Driftmark throne because the Sea Snake is injured and perhaps going to die. And so it comes back into question of whether or not Princess Rhaenyra's children are legitimate Valyrian blood to take over the throne. So it's a lot of political moving between Alicent and Rhaenyra and the Greens and the Blacks to see who would take over this throne, because who is chosen will either solidify or destroy those children's claim to the Iron Throne. A lot going on, and there's a lot of setup. Like, they take forever just to walk through the castle that just has some new religious, like the King's Landing is very different from when we saw it 6 years ago in the show. And they spend way too long being like, oh, they're really religious now. It's like a monastery. Oh, there's a 7-star up there. Oh, it's like, you don't have to walk so slow through the palace and point out every difference. That whole sequence was just a little too long and dragging, but there was good. And one thing that I do want to point out for Rings of Power specifically is now there's a Queen Regent comparison, which is kind of odd. Now, Queen Regent, I don't think 100% applies in this situation, because in my experience, Regent is usually done when the heir or the king is underage, not when the king is indisposed. So I don't think Regent would still be the correct term at this time, especially because the hand is the one doing it. So the terminology may be inaccurate, but it is a good comparison between Queen Regent Muriel in Rings of Power and Alicent, and how to do that right and how to justify that right. This show definitely did that much better with Alicent, justified her authority, and so I really enjoyed some of that comparison. It's very odd that we're seeing this much comparison at this point. And after last episode, Aemond quickly became one of my favorite characters, and I was very concerned with a time jump and actor swap so soon after getting to like this character. And for the most part, I think this new guy does a decent enough job. It's weird that he looks way older than his older brother Aegon in this situation, but I do like Aemond still. Not as much as last episode, but Aemond is still really good. And his intro where he's fighting the Kristen Cole, and he says, "Hey nephews, you here to train?" You can kind of infer a lot from his voice. The actor did a very good job. And this episode is without question Viserys' again. His makeup and the CGI that they did with his decrepit form was a little bit much, a lot much. I can't believe he survived this long. I thought he was going to be dead by the end of episode 4 or 5. Not this long, but his makeup and the CGI was way too much, but his acting was on point. I really liked the way he was portraying this character. He did a phenomenal job. So he ekes out quite a bit of quality and a lot of points for this episode, if nothing else. And my favorite scene of the episode is the courtroom scene where they're actually talking about who gets to be the heir to the Driftmark throne. They've given their own cases, and Viserys walks in, and it looks painful for him to just walk across the room. There's some really good music going on. Everyone's kind of freaking out without saying anything. I really like that moment. It's like, this is an epic moment, and I felt that. That's one of the few times I felt that in the show, besides when Daemon killed the crab feeder. This was one of those other moments that I really felt it. And one thing that really sealed it off for me is really good because Matt Smith, he didn't have much lines in the scene, but he just goes and helps his brother, and you can see the care in his face, and that's really credit to Matt Smith, who his love for his brother has really defined his character up to this point. Now that it's a little bit more Rhaenyra, but it's still there, and you can still see he cares. And it was really good decision to have Daemon help him up the rest of the steps to the throne, and. I really love both of those characters, and they are by far the standouts of this entire season and this episode specifically. Now, the scene escalates quite quickly when the Sea Snake's brother will not take the authority of King Viserys, saying that Rhaenyra's son will be the heir to the Driftmark throne because he calls them out as bastards in front of everyone. And as we've established in previous episodes, that is treason. And Daemon just, he's such a Chad. I love Daemon. He just chops that dude's head off. Like, I was not expecting that. I expected like guards to come and arrest him or something. I admit I was surprised to see Daemon standing there behind the brother after he was killed. That was a good surprise for me. I quite enjoyed that, especially with his punch of a line, because Viserys says, "I will have your tongue for calling them bastards." And then Daemon, when he cuts off his head, he does it in such a way that his tongue is still left on his body, which is a really precise cut. And I love how he just says, he can keep his tongue, I guess. Like that was a really good moment. I love Daemon, and he really sold that moment quite well. And the other scene that I thought was good was when they all sat down to dinner together, and the king's speech specifically about how we're family, we need to stick together, put aside your differences, was done very well. And I liked how he said, "I want you to see me as I truly am, not as the king." And again, his makeup and his CGI was way over the top. Like, there's no way he's still alive. Like, they went too far with it, but I really enjoyed his performance, and he's just killing it in the role. I'm so sad that we had to say goodbye to him in this episode. And there was a few good interactions, like with Aemond and a few other people with the toast. Besides Viserys' speech, it definitely decreases in value once he leaves. And, that's about where my praise of the episode ends. Some minor things. Viserys' bed costume that he wears at the beginning of the episode, his, like, a night clothes or whatever, his nightgown, is way too, like, wow, that was very Liberace, all the furls and cuffs. That was way over the top. I did not know what was happening there, but that's just whatever. And again, too much setup is definitely this show's problem, and it's gotten to a point where it's definitely beyond good amount of setup. I feel like 5 episodes, about half the season worth of setup, is justifiable. At this point, we're 8 episodes in, and we just finished the setup, and supposedly next episode is when the Targaryen Civil War begins. But as this series has been going, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually hold off the actual beginning till the final episode. So I very conflicted, and they need to stop referencing the Song of Ice and Fire. So the fewer references to Game of Thrones right now, the better, because we don't want to be reminded of how poorly that show ended and where ultimately this story is going, because that destroys immersion and care to a certain extent because it ends so poorly. So all the constant references in this episode were quite too far for me. Overall, I thought this episode was about middle of the range for the season. Very meh. Viserys really carried it for me. Otherwise, it would probably be at the very bottom or close to the bottom of this season. I'd probably have to give this episode a 6 out of 10 and maybe a 5.5 depending on how I'm feeling. But again, those two scenes and Viserys' performance are really what carried it. The rest was nothing very special, nothing really memorable, and not a whole lot of performances that really landed for me besides Daemon, Viserys, and the new Aemon to a certain extent. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.